Hi, everyone. So this is Crystal, and I'm coming to you from Southwest Colorado. And I am here with my dear friend and content editor and a right-hand person and voice of reason, Peige Rosales. So hi, Paige. It's so good to see you.
It is so good to see you from the other side of the world. We miss you over here in Europe.
I miss you too. And I miss Italy for sure. Um, so Paige and I were talking. Paige and I can talk on and on for hours. And so we decided we had to be very structured with this conversation. And I thought it was a really helpful and important conversation to have for anybody else who's writing, or if someone's curious about the whole writing process. Because I came into writing fairly recently in my life. I didn't go to college for writing. I didn't have writing in school. I just decided one day I want to write. And I took some classes on writing, online classes, and I wrote a couple of narratives. And I said, hey, can you edit this? And I didn't know really what an editor was, except that someone that looks at your stuff and they mark out spelling errors and put commas and periods and such into your writing. And I had asked Paige to do some edits. I had done a couple of narratives for some contests. And when I sent it to Paige, I got back such rich feedback. It was, yeah, she did say comma here, semicolon here, ellipsis here, dash. And then whenever she does this, I tend to do a lot of ellipses and a lot of dashes. She's like, whoa, hold back. So when I learn something new, I want to use it all the time. But what she would say is, for example, I'm going to use something you said, Paige, that we talked about earlier. Is I did a narrative. It's on my website if you ever want to read it, in the blog section about dogs, and it's called Love the Greatest Gift. And in it, I'm talking about how I came to adopt this sweet dog. And I had a line in there that said, I knew that if I didn't adopt her that day, she would likely be euthanized. And Paige said, you don't need that in there. That's a lot of extra words. We can get that message from the paragraph. Let's take out those words. And if I remember correctly, I had a document that's probably 1,000 words, and Paige easily knocked it down 200 words. She didn't knock it down. She just said, take this stuff out, reword it. And I came back with a very clean, easier to read document. And so I didn't even really, I knew people who wrote books would send it to the editors, and the editors would do all kinds of different stuff, but I never really experienced the process. And so what I found with Paige is that when I was writing something, I really needed that second eye to look at it and really say, is this important? Word this differently. And what I saw the process was that my writing improved to the point where if someone's reading it, they get more lost into the story as opposed to reading words. And I was like, oh, what kind of editor is this? So now when people have all these editors listed, there's different kinds of editors. So, Paige, I know you are an avid reader, teacher of early childhood development, and you have read thousands and thousands of children's books. And that's what Malcolm Gladwell calls, once you have 10,000 hours in something, then you become a professional, an expert, proficient at that craft. And I knew you had that. So can you just talk a little bit more about how did you know that when I gave you something to read, you weren't just going to add commas and periods?
Right. Okay. Great questions. And so much fun. So I have to tell you that for years and years and years, making things look good, or not look good, but making things easy to consume visually has been this kind of this passion. I had a friend who asked me to give her feedback on a master's program that she was doing in education. And it was a series of lesson plans. Well, I gave her feedback on what I thought about the lesson plans, but then I asked her if I could please make each of the lesson plan formats match, because it made me happy to make them match. But it made it easy to consume, because what I was thinking was, if I were going to read this, I would want to know every single time in this person's work where to look for the title, where to look for the resources, where to look for the time signatures of how long things are going to, I would want it to make sense. I would want it to make so much sense that I never thought about it. Once I understood how it flowed, that would be predictable. And these aren't things that again, like you, I didn't go to school to learn that. I had a brilliant writing teacher in high school. Like, I'm old, so long before we had advanced placement classes, we had major works classes. And Vincent D'Amico from Lee High School in Houston, Texas, was a brilliant man, and he taught me a tremendous amount about reading. So I'm just giving a shout out to him in his memory. But I've always just liked to do that. It was fun for me. So when you asked me to read your stuff, I was like, oh, sure, I can do that. What I discovered in this kind of gift of you asking me to do some editing for you is that I kind of intuitively could say, this is, if you change the word here, or a lot of it has to do with, if you feel into this, tell us how you were feeling. I just sort of intuitively knew where you were going, and then offering, and I just want to make it real clear, I never changed your words in terms, and I don't change people's words, but to offer or to make suggestions or to ask for different wording, it's exactly that. It's, instead of paying attention to the writing, we pay attention to the message. And man, but we know it. People who are readers, sometimes there's a delicious sentence or there's a delicious paragraph where the writing is so elegant that it draws attention to itself. But unless the writing is so elegant that it's beautiful to our ears and our hearts, I think that most of us are looking for writing to do the job of conveying a message or telling a story or inviting us into an experience. We don't want to pay attention to how it's written. And it was, working with you has been so much fun for me because we got a synergy thing going on, and it's just been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has been so much fun. And do you think that as an editor yourself, how is it that working with someone, because we're friends before we ever started working together, and I can, like, working with a friend could be hard, right? Because it's like, you gave me this, this material to read, and I'm kind of tearing it up a little bit. But you and I know each other. Was it easier because we were friends and we knew each other so well, or was it harder because I don't want this to interfere with the friendship?
That's a really, really good question. And I think because of the depth of our friendship, because I know who you are, and actually our friendship deepened in this process. I think initially I asked permission. Because we were doing it for fun. You were writing for fun. I was editing for fun. And I remember asking permission. Do you just want me to look at, commas and capitalization and punctuation and grammar, or do you want me to look at the message as well? And you said, no, I want all the feedback. You said, I'm growing here. I really want to do this, and I'm learning. That gave me permission to offer suggestions, to ask questions. So that was helpful. I've definitely read things from people where it's been clear that they want me to read it and tell them that I like it. And so I do. Because some folks just need to some folks just need to be held because it's their early steps and stages, and they just need to be encouraged to keep using their voice. You wanted to refine your voice. You wanted to refine your craft. And so I think that in terms of friendship, it was important for me to just know what you were really open for.
And
Once
that's
I knew,
perfect. Yeah. That you asked. Yeah. I don't remember
That's-
you asking, but it's perfect that you did.
yeah, because I've been there before, and with people showing me art or writing or music or whatever. Once that was clear, we really got into a flow and a rhythm, so that it's so easy to work with you and so much fun to work with you, because we've worked together a lot now, and I can't say that I know your voice completely, but I can say that I know your voice in relationship, certainly in relationship to the Hope series, to those characters.
Okay.
And
Yeah, that's interesting. And as just to kind of explain what you mean. So Paige is like my I don't know if you remember in the Peanuts story, Linus has his blanket. So everything I write, I feel it's important for me for Paige to look at it. So Paige has read all of my blogs, all of my newsletters, and all of the narratives that I have written, all of the travel articles that I have written. So it's interesting that you say that you don't really know my voice because you have read so much of my work.
but you're talking about new things all the time. Like,
Okay.
in my opinion, I'm starting
Okay.
to understand your voice in your blog, because your voice is becoming more clear.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. That totally makes sense, right? It's like,
Absolutely.
I feel like writing stories, writing the narratives, it's a little bit different. Everything feels so different, but writing in so many ways feels like you went to the department store and you're trying on swimming suits. Right? And maybe some of y'all try on swimsuits and it's like, hello, everybody. I'm not that. I'm like, open the curtain a little bit. Here's my toe. And so I think the more that I write, the more that I'm opening the curtain more and feeling more my flow. And I know the last newsletter I wrote, I felt more of myself coming out because I made like little silly silly sentences. And you said, I'm hearing your voice more.
Yes, absolutely. And there was less. One of our jokes, we'll let people in on the joke. Crystal always says, I dropped something in our box. I don't think it'll take you very long. And an hour and a half
30
later,
seconds.
but I will say, hey, Charlie Baxter. But I will say this last one didn't take very much time at all, because I agree. I think you are finding your voice. I think you're more clear about who you are in the world and what you want to say, which is super exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But that takes time. And I think it's really funny. You were mentioning there are all these different types of editors. Yeah, I didn't know that either.
We learned together, right? Like, well, I think, do we need, and you're like, well, I'm sorry, I totally talked over you.
Okay,
I'm sorry, go
okay,
ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just say this, because we started talking about making it a business deal. And we were like, I don't know, how much do people make? And we looked it up, and I was like, oh, and I remember sending you the link. Oh, look, there are all kinds of different editors. I've done some of this and some of this, but mostly this or whatever, right? It was just very funny. And I think that over time, editors do help writers refine their voice. I know that for you, the more I asked you to pause and really feel into it, and it's kind of clearing the channels, clearing to let your voice come through. It's your voice, but you just needed that support. You needed a coach. You needed somebody to help you find that rhythm.
Yeah. And I think really, I call you the content editor, but in many ways, you were my writing coach because I'm new to writing and I learned a lot about it. But then you are the expert on the reading end. So you were really helpful to really help me to hone that. The mantra used to tell me is show me, don't tell me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's true, you didn't rewrite things. I kind of wanted you to do a few times. Do it for me. But no, it was a bit, but you would take me along and like, come on, do your process. You have a process, do your process and, get back with me. You can do this and make it better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say make it truer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we've come to know this, we've come to learn this together. When it's right, it's because it's the truest version of itself that it can possibly be. And then it's done. And then I know it's done. And like we know it together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say, yes, did it get better? Yes, it's gotten better. Has your voice gotten better? Yes. But I really think it's truer. I think that it has to do with being the most authentic version of itself, of the story, of the character, of your voice that it can possibly be.
Do you feel that so in writing stories and you have these characters and you develop the characters, do you feel that because you're into drama and you like to act and do theater, does having that acting and theater experience help in this process as far as the characters and their voices and seeing the character development and saying, this isn't, because I've watched certain movies or read books like this character would not say that or behave that way. And I can tell on a series when I watch it on Netflix, like series 5 had a totally different writer. And I go back and sure enough, they did. It's so clear to me. Did that help? I mean, on your end, is that an asset?
That's an interesting question because so my sister was the theater person when we were growing up. She was the artistic one. I was the good grady one, like that. But I have recently done acting and played in that realm, and that's been a lot of fun. I think that being an avid reader and having just trusting this sense in myself of what's true, of what seems true, of what rings true, of what makes it's not make sense like in an intellectual way, but it's almost this feeling, feeling in my gut, feeling in my heart. And that is true in acting. It's true when I read things. It's true when I listen to people, that there's a knowing. And like, I will tell you this funny story. I recently did a very short, play. It ran less than an hour. I was one character in one very small, I had very small little parts. I had my one big part. Everybody had their one big part, but I just had one. I think I had 5 costume changes. Now, some of it was everybody had those costume changes because we were in the background and we were throwing a shirt on and throwing a shirt off over our just basic black. But my character had to be a little girl and then a young woman and then an older woman, like around my age, in her late 50s, early 60s. And there was a continuity, right? Like a way I held my body when she was a young woman. The clothes were the same, but how I held my body, how I did my voice. Did anybody notice that? Probably not. But but it made sense for me because it felt true. And so I just think that there's that feeling of truth, feeling of speaking
Mhm.
authentically.
And I think they would have noticed had you not have done it. I mean, I think when things are polished and good, you don't notice. You just get lost in it. But what you do notice, like fingernail scratching on a chalkboard, is like you notice when it does not jiving.
That makes a lot of sense. It makes sense to me. And I will say that your writing has never felt like nails on a chalkboard.
Okay. If it was, you would have sent it back.
I would have sent it back, but I do think that part of that is, and I think that this is true for people with something to say. I think that when people have something to say, there may be a lot of gook on the top that needs to be sorted out and released and let go, but that authors come to, if you've got the courage, like, let's put it this way, if you've got the courage to take a pen and put it to paper or start clicking away on those keyboards, that there's something true inside that wants to come out. And I think that authors with the courage to sit down and start the process, they may have to sort some things out, but there's that truth deep inside.
Is the base. One of the things in the book that we have coming out really soon, Hope is a Butterfly, If You Don't Squish the Caterpillar. As I was writing this, I work with teens mostly and grownups, and I have worked with children, but not in teaching them stuff in therapy thing, therapy in a therapy realm. And as I was writing, I tend to use words that I speak with. And I was concerned because there's 3 books out that have been written, and the languaging is similar. And I would ask you, is this word going to be too big for children? Because when I had shared my manuscript with other friends, that was really the consistent feedback that I got, is it's a cute story, or I like the story, or whatever they said about the story, but the words are too big for children. And that was really where I depended on you as the child development expert to explain to me if it was or not. So can you expand on that?
Absolutely. If you were writing an early reader, and basically what that means is a book that children who are 6 years old or 7 years old or 8 years old even can be expected to read independently, just to pick up and read with success, then you want to have a controlled vocabulary. Think about like the Dr. Seuss type books where there's 50 words, 100 words, 150 words, so that those words are repeating throughout, and just kind of mix them up. And you can do this, even very early readers will have 5 words and they're just moved around and repeated. Those are important books for children to feel like successful, independent readers. But for children to become truly literate, to fall in love with reading, they have to be exposed to quality children's literature. I'm not saying it's not possible to have a controlled vocabulary book that's quality children's literature. I think we can point to some of them. But when we look at the children's literature that withstands the test of time, the oft returned to books that children go back to over and over again, they say, read it again, mommy, read it again, daddy, read it again. Those books very often are books that children need an adult to interact with for those books to really make sense. And there are words in early childhood education. We call that scaffolding. You can get farther with an advanced peer or an adult than you can on your own. These are read aloud books. These are lap books. These are the delicious stories that we can fall into, that we return to over and over again, because they're beautifully told, because the language is amazing, because the stories are complex. And there are old books like uh, Ping is one. It's about a little duck, or Make Way for Ducklings. There are two duck books, or more recent ones, Hecate Peg, which is written by, oh, now I'm not going to be able to think of them. Have these people in my head. It'll come to me. At any rate, these are not stories that that 6-year-olds are expected to just be able to open up and read themselves. These are books that are shared with children by adults, that have big words in them, that have complex vocabulary and interesting sentence structure. We learn to speak before we learn to read, and we learn to enjoy delicious literature before we can read it for ourselves, ideally. And so when you came to me with your book, with your little story, as you called it, I remember I said, this is more than a little story. This has the potential for being really beautiful children's literature. And I stand by that. I think it is. I am so excited.
And I think to the part, when I gave the manuscript to my friends, they didn't have the luxury of the illustrations. Now, they read the descriptions of my illustrations, but when you see the illustrations along with the words, I remember as a kid, I loved books. I think that, thankfully for my mother, gave me the love of books. I couldn't read, but I could figure out certain words because I would look at the picture. And maybe I didn't know exactly what that word meant, but I knew, well, it probably meant something to do with this because of the illustration. And I do feel that Kat has a way to bring the illustration to match the words, because one of the words is, I think that came up on the screen. One of the words is chrysalis. And, as a kid, we did not, because my dad read it and said, oh, I don't know what a chrysalis is, which is true. When we were at school, we didn't learn the word chrysalis. We learned the word cocoon. Cocoon was for everything. But in the story, you have the chrysalis. And so that, okay, we're talking about this cocoon, this chrysalis, I think is an example. And I'm guessing that as children have it read to them, that the words won't be a distraction like it is to a lot of the grownups that read it. And it was like, not a lot, but a few that said is my concern.
Sure, it makes sense. Also, that's how we all learn new words. I mean, there are words that we know only from reading. And I frequently, when I'm talking to parents about how children learn to read, I use the heather on the heath as an example. Like, most of us haven't been to a heath and walked among the heather. Now, we have a picture of that in our heads. It could be wrong or it could be right. But we've got a picture,
right?
And we got it from reading. We got it from immersing ourselves in literature. And that's definitely how kids learn. But of course, they have the benefit of the illustration, which helps them to begin to create these pictures in their minds. The other part is when kids interact with books, very young children who are either looking at a book for the first time, but most often they've heard a book once or twice, they really love it, and they'll open up the book and they'll tell the story based upon the illustrations. But if you're around little kids, this is my challenge to you. Listen to the way that they do that. They don't they're not talking about the book. They're not describing the pictures. They're not even having a conversation. There's a very specific literary language that they flip into when they're using the illustrations to tell the story. Once upon a time, there was a dog, and the dog was going to the park to play in the grass with the insects. Flip. And then there was another dog. The cadence, the vocabulary that they use are very specific to literature. It's exciting. Watching that happen with kids, to me, is very exciting.
Yeah, well, that would be fun to definitely watch, to see how I did that as a kid. I don't remember the words I used, but I did that all the time before I could read. So that will it'd be interesting if I can have one of my friends' children who can't read yet, who haven't learned to read yet, do that with the story. It'll be fun. Yeah. So, the book is full of lessons. It's like the way I describe it, it's an onion, and you may read the book and there may be one nugget that you get out of it, one thing of, that's thought provoking. Not even you need to live your life this way. That's something that we've talked about, right? That so many children's books, what you called it was didactic. Because when we talked about having a children's book, you said there's a lot of children's books out there that are very didactic. And I go, what does didactic mean? A lot of words I don't know. So I have to, read the context. And so could you explain more of what that is?
Sure. So there are tons of what we call SEL, or social emotional learning programs and books and experiences and support stuff online and in everywhere right now, because the world is an intense place and there are big problems and kids need support. And so that's a good thing. Very often what I find is that these books they're kind of teachy and preachy, or they're a bit there's not a story that you can fall into. Didactic is definitely teachy and preachy. And sometimes that's really helpful. Sometimes we need a book about what to do when you're mad, or what happens when you tell a lie, or whatever it is. But most often, in my experience as a teacher, what's helpful is when the juice is in a character-rich story. The kids care about the character. They care about what's happening with the character. Their hearts are open, invested, and involved. And then there's a lesson to be teased out, which means that the kids can discover it. Teachers and parents and mental health providers or whomever can pose questions, but often the questions will come up from the kids themselves. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of conversation about choices characters make, why they made those choices, what were some alternative choices that maybe were before the character. Those are the things that are really juicy, that can be returned to over and over and over again, and yield conversations that can be life-changing for children. I would imagine that most of us, I know certainly it's true for me, have books. Maybe they're books that we read as small children, maybe they're mid-grade fiction or young adult fiction or whatever, but lessons that we learned mm-hmm. from the books that we read, that we took into young adulthood and even into today. I know that that's certainly true for me. And they are not the books that tell me how to have good manners or those kinds of books. Those books are helpful and I've used them and I will continue to return to them. But the books that stick are the ones that really engage children in the drama of life and how the characters are dealing with the drama of life.
Mm-hmm. And it goes into the empathy because they care about this character and they can somehow relate to it. And I think the Winnie the Pooh books that we grew up with, I think are a great example of that, right? Because Winnie the Pooh and all the characters and Piglet, they have these beautiful conversations really about life, love and caring and friendship, and that are beautiful. And that was some advice that you gave me in writing the book, which really resonated with me really well anyway. When I work with in therapy, it's not necessarily even teenagers, like, I'd like to tell you to do not date that guy. Don't go to that party. Don't do this. Please don't. But if you tell a teenager don't do it, what are they going to do? They're going to do it. They're going to do the opposite. So it's just really holding that space and having a conversation and exploring, let's explore this. And then you make your own decision about whatever it is in your life. And so with the books, I don't even like to call it lessons, because I feel like when I call it lessons, it sounds like I want you to learn this. And it's really, with the book, there are things that happen to these characters that are impactful, and that the characters are learning, and it presents an opportunity for someone to get a message if they want that message or not. There's a lot of messages in the book that you may read the book once and say, ooh, even grown-ups can read it and say, I really kind of can relate to that, or whatever. And so there's just a lot of different things in the book like that. And the book is going to be coming out soon, and not to give too many spoiler alerts, but what lesson would you say, or what meaning, or what nugget for you, Paige, in Hope, not the other ones, but just for Hope as a Butterfly, and the first book really resonates with you?
Well, I think one of the things that you said is there are so many. And so I think I can answer what's coming up for me today, because it might be different another time. What's coming up for me today is to make space for, how would I put this? Because I think this is a more subtle message. To make space for the growth of those around us in its own time. And I think that's what Charlie does. Now, I don't think I've ever, actually, no, I haven't. Until this moment, I've never even vocalized that. I've never thought about that as a message in the book, as something that's going on. But because of things that are going on in my life right now, that's the thing that came out.
And that's true, right? And even it's in that, it's like, even, Charlie's talking about, we want to help our humans, be better. But we let them learn as they go. And what we do is we be the example, and just let it be that. So you're right. It's a very soft way of letting people grow at their own pace.
Yeah. And trusting that growth. Charlie does it all the time. He does it for Gracie. He does it for Hope. He does it for Samantha. It's kind of who he is in the world. He holds this, he's a gentle guide, trusting that each character is going to get to their best selves in their own time.
Right.
Powerful message.
It is, right? It is. And it's so subtle. I think one of the ones for me that resonates with me today is not taking things personal. How often does someone say something like, my brother said something yesterday, and I totally read into it. But he said, I'm leaving, it's cold in here. Now, he could have meant it's cold in here, I'm leaving, I'll see you later. What my story was, the tension in the room is cold, you're cold-hearted, I'm leaving, right? Isn't that silly? That's not what he said. But I created, and so then I'm perseverating on, oh my goodness, was I rude? Did I say something not nice? Was I not being engaging? Was I not being warm? And spend energy thinking about one sentence I took personal that probably had nothing to do with me. It may have been that I'm cold, gotta go now, see you later, I'm busy. All right. So that's just a little example. But how often does that happen in life? And
and
we create the story, this narrative.
I don't think it's at all silly. I think that happens over and over and over again. Certainly it happens to me. I think it's a beautiful example. And yes, don't take things personally.
Yeah, don't take things personally. Because most of the time, it has nothing to do with us. And if it does, if someone doesn't want to talk about it, or they don't tell us, we don't really know if it's vague, Or we could say, did I do something to offend? You know, we could add that question.
Absolutely. We can ask the question. We can be curious.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I think that's a beautiful example.
So, well, Paige, it's been so much fun talking to you. And before we go, you're doing some really cool things in your life right now. So you're going through some transitions, and I just want to give you the opportunity to plug some of the cool stuff that you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Crystal. I appreciate it. So at the moment, I am doing a formal coaching course so that I can learn how to do in real life what I've been practicing doing for a while now. So I'm offering a couple of things for the month of August. I'm offering a Inner Brilliance Parenting one-on-one coaching experience. It's really to help parents who kind of want to go deep, up their parenting game, get rid of some of that old stagnant stuff, and figure out how to have more connected relationships, more flow in their relationships with their kids. And I can really work with people who have children from preschool age into young adulthood. Because I've got those experiences. My kids are grown. The other thing I'm doing is I'm taking on additional author clients. Again, people who are interested in stepping into a one-on-one coaching relationship where you've got something inside that's right there that's needing to come out, and we can sort of clear away any blocks that are there. And I really I get so excited helping people find their voice, because whether it's the parenting thing or the artist thing, author thing, it's your one voice. You are the only person that can show up in that way, and helping folks to find their authentic self is just a really exciting thing for me. So that's what I'm up to. If people are interested, they can check my Calendly link, which I will give to you, or they can reach out to me at my email, which is happypeige, HAPPYPEIGE, all one word, at gmail.com. So
and one of the other things that you're doing is, so if someone is, so for instance, with me, I had someone help me to create a website. I had to write the content, and it's much easier for me to write about other characters. But when I had to write my bio, oh, that was so difficult. And you also helped the illustrator, my illustrator. She's not mine, but she's the illustrator for my stories. Kat Powell, you helped her write the bio. And so if you're someone that you need a bio for something, or you're creating a website and you need someone to help you with the content, you are fabulous at that. And that's also something that you're doing as well.
It's true. It's true. I'm working on copywriting and editing. I'm actually working with, I'm in the process of building a team effort to help people put together a website, marketing, copywriting, that sort of thing. So if you have questions about any of this, please reach out to me. And here's the other thing. Here's my promise. We will see if it's a good fit, because I know lots of folks, and if it's not a good fit with me, I want you, the client, to get what's your next right step. If that's me, awesome. If it's somebody else, we'll get that figured out as well. So if you have questions, if any of this conversation with Crystal and me has brought something up for you, reach out. We'll chat and we'll figure it out.
That's great. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Paige. This has been so much fun. And I know you and I could talk for hours and hours, but I don't think people would want to listen to us talk for hours and hours.
Probably not.
Well, thank you so much. And I'll put all of the details also in the comment section.
That sounds good.
Okay. Ciao, Bella.
Thanks, Krista.